Okay, a few other things that we didn't have a chance to respond to in the first two parts of this episode, but I know some people are going to so love this kind of discussion they will listen to more, and I appreciate this. Let's respond to some common arguments that are going to be made on both sides of this issue. One of the arguments that Bryan made to me about his picture is he said, we would not hesitate to make this comparison if it were 3-year-olds. If we were legal to kill 3-year-olds in big centers, then we would not hesitate if something in Colorado happened to compare it to the 3-year-olds.
I don't know if I can even talk about that because it's so outside of my realm of understanding to even consider.
Well, and
I mean, imagine that Peter Singer gets his wish. Imagine Peter Singer. Let's say it's not 3-year-olds. Let's say 6-month-olds. Let's say we say it's legal because 6-month-olds are not sentient, and sentience is the necessary condition for personhood. So Peter Singer, I don't want to say gets his wish. I didn't mean that negatively, but in Peter Singer's view, it becomes the more popular view than what it is now. And not just Peter Singer, Michael Tooley, Minerva Giuliani. There's other people, Giuliani. Let's say most people get to believing that, and we make infanticide legal in a painless, euthanizing way, and we probably would. Would we do the comparison then?
I think the answer we have to look at that if that was legal in the society, then the society has a very different viewpoint than our current society. And our first step would be understanding how people came to that viewpoint and then finding the best way to address it. I don't think it would have been very helpful for one of us to walk into, here I'm going to do a comparison, wait for it, to walk into Nazi Germany and just start yelling, you can't kill handicapped kids. How can you do that? And make some kind of comparison.
They already have been.
Because they have been, and you have to meet them where they are. And
at some point you declare war on them.
We can debate that on another topic, but I think that
just war, people, is all I'm talking about. Just war. Don't get mad at me.
Let's debate that later. But you have to address the society. In our society, it's widely accepted and normal for abortion to happen, and so we have to counteract that, at least in the first trimester. And so we have to counteract that with things that aren't normal, and I think we have to consider that. So meet them where they are, you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think I responded to Bryan on the phone, but I wouldn't. I don't think I've made the comparison, even if it were for the reasons I've already said. I don't agree that. So I mean,
there's better choices.
It's basically that question. It is the gut check. If you say I would, if this were infants being killed, then probably you don't think of the unborn as full human beings. Like that would be the gut check. For me, I think I pass the gut check because I'm saying I do think that the unborn are persons. I think even inside, I think that. And I don't think I would make the comparison because of these. Some people say, some people would say it's the 4,000 babies dying a day that are being minimized. This is a good opportunity to make the stats meaningful to people. And we kind of talked about trying to make stats meaningful. Yeah. I think my take is that it'll be meaningful to pro-lifers, but it won't be meaningful to most pro-choice people.
Right, exactly.
Well, and I think that the comparison, particularly to 9/11, can make the 4,000 a day very meaningful. But you have to be very careful in how you do that. And frankly, I don't think posting photos to Facebook is the best way to couch the issue so that it becomes meaningful and so that your intent is made known. And, you guys might even disagree with me a little bit.
I disagree a little bit. But I think there's some photos you can post to Facebook that are awesome, that are totally get people talking about the right thing.
And we're talking about good, better, best.
I think they're few and far between all the pro-life memes that I see right now.
Yeah.
But I think there are some. I've seen some that are helpful to basically everybody. I mean, the kind of things that we put on college campuses, I think generally speaking, are helpful. That's why we put them up. Now, I'm always reevaluating them, and I'm doing a lot of that right now on some different. I'm not going to say more about that, but we're really actively considering, what's going to be most effective with most people.
And that's the question. I think if you had a stack of memes or posters that you could put up on Facebook,
that's a future episode. By the way,
look at them and say, okay, which one of these is going to make people talk most productively? Right. Which ones are going to bring up the most rabbit trails? Throw those to the side.
And I think Bryan Kemper would agree with that. I think Bryan Kemper would say, show me something better, and I will use that instead. I think he meant that when he said that.
All right, we'll work on that.
We should work on that, because I didn't have an answer for it. I don't know what's the best thing, but I just think there's something better. That's all I got for you right now. Some people say babies are dying, and we should do whatever it takes to end the apathy.
Well, I think the first question, there's two questions I would have with that. First, does this actually end apathy? Or does it just annoy people and frustrate people?
Good point.
I know even as a pro-life person, whenever I see memes on a political or social issue, my first reaction usually is that's annoying.
Because it always oversimplifies
Exactly.
both sides.
Usually, I think every single one I've ever seen has some kind of a logical fallacy in it too, that they're making some kind of equivocation or straw man of the other side.
Usually they're kind of snippy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And,
They ridicule.
but then the other thing is ask, what does whatever it takes mean?
That was my first question.
People say when they attack abortionists.
Right.
They'll do
Let's say
whatever
they
it
don't
takes.
mean that. Let's say they mean anything within reason.
Well, then that's not
Right.
whatever it takes, and I say that this is within reason. Being careful in what you post is within reason
That's
to
right.
stop
Effective.
apathy.
Yep, I agree. Okay. Someone said no comparisons are needed if both events are inherently wrong.
I disagree, or they would be the same event. I mean, both are wrong. It's wrong for me to shoot Josh, and it's wrong for, they're still different, and so comparisons.
I think analogies can be helpful even if they're not perfect analogies. That's why they're called analogies.
Right.
I got picked on a pro-choice group for comparing to the Holocaust. But I was just talking to a guy who says he's pro-life, except he thinks that abortion should be legal. So I asked him a moral, legal question.
Right.
It was about slavery. I'm sorry, it wasn't about the Holocaust. It was about slavery.
Yeah.
And so people were like, "How dare you compare it?" I was like, "I'm not saying they're both the same.
I'm
not
asking a
saying."
question.
I'm asking a narrow question about this moral, legal distinction. If we're going to say, and I basically was like, "Okay, we have to figure this out right now. If we're going to say no analogies are allowed if they're not perfect, then you can no longer use the violinist. You can no longer basically talk about any. I mean, you can't compare intuitions on anything unless you make comparisons.
Analogies are not the same thing. You don't compare an apple to an apple.
Right. It's
You compare
that's not
apples
an
and
analogy.
oranges, right? Oh, wait, you're not supposed to compare apples and oranges. What am I talking about?
Yeah, and the goal of analogy is to test intuition, moral
Right.
intuition. And that's why things like the Holocaust or slavery are helpful, is because it helps us examine our
If you
intuitions.
do it carefully.
If you do it carefully, yeah.
Right.
And you're making the right.
Okay, so I solicited people on both our Facebook fan page as well as my debate page for people to respond to this. So I'm just going to read responses, and I want you guys quick responses to everybody, because I think some of this, there's some, even if I don't agree with everything that was said, some thoughtful things were said that I think merit a response. Nick on Facebook said, if the picture leads to the question, well, what makes killing a born person different from killing the unborn, which in some cases it did, then it helps advance the discussion for unborn rights. Comparing abortion to, say, infanticide may help make the comparison seem more apparent, yet some people will be turned off, but people are always turned off by the pro-life message.
I would agree. I think you made a good point. If you can control the conversation so that you are focusing on what's the difference between a born person dying and an unborn person dying, then you're on the right topic. I don't think it generally works that way, though.
Yeah, I think I'm a similar point that just because a couple people found it helpful doesn't mean that the majority of your Facebook friends did, and you need to weigh and understand, is this the most helpful thing I could post?
I think it helps advance the discussion with those that actually debate it.
Right, exactly.
But it does the opposite to the, like, it's not just neutral
Those
for
people don't
for
need
the
help
others. For
to-
the others, it's not just neutral. It does the opposite. It actually helps the non-advancement. I think it's like a backtrack or whatever. With people that don't read it carefully, with those that don't give Bryan the benefit of the doubt that he deserves as a person who does believe that what happened in Colorado was tragic. Or, the people that just move on and don't engage with it. I think it's not helpful for those people. And I do think that trot out the toddler thing, comparing abortion to infanticide, is different. Because it would be the same if a bunch of toddlers were massacred somewhere and then immediately we compare that to abortion. Well, then that would be kind of the same thing. But that's not what we usually do. We basically say to people who are assuming the unborn aren't human, we compare their abortion for, let's say, poverty, like the poverty argument, to what about killing the unborn, about killing newborns because of poverty? Well, no, I don't think that's true. Okay, well then probably the problem is we think that the unborn are
Right.
right.
And you're comparing what people already accept as being wrong to what people accept as being okay. And that's the appropriate comparison that we've been talking about.
Okay, Kelly on Facebook, and this is along the same lines, but there's a little bit more to. There's a new aspect to this, and this by far got the most likes on our page. Most people liked this comment. She said, "I believe these comparisons are basically good, usually, and many times necessary. Like any good teacher would do in explaining a pro-life view to a non-pro-lifer, one must use examples and images of familiar things in order to reach the student where he or she is. What better way than to use an example from the media that everyone, well, almost everyone, knows about? It almost doesn't matter if they initially respond negatively, they certainly won't forget it."
I would agree and disagree with that statement. I think as a teacher, you need to think about the purpose of your example. We've talked about the purpose of comparing to 9/11 or the Holocaust. We don't see yet what the purpose of comparing to the massacre in Colorado would be, when there's more helpful ones that might not create as much problems. And I disagree with the fact that her kind of saying that you can't make a negative comparison because at least people are thinking. I think you can make a negative, and you can be a bad teacher.
Liz said that you can be a bad teacher, and I think you can also be a really offensive teacher. I mean, I had that experience. So you don't want to offend people. Yeah, it may get your point across, but it doesn't mean that it's going to have a positive.
You won't forget your offensive teachers, but it doesn't mean that they have a positive influence on your thinking or whatever.
Exactly, or make me really enjoy that subject.
And I don't think just because everyone knows about it is what necessarily makes the comparison helpful. I mean, when people bring up fetal pain, we talk about Gabi Gingrich, a girl who was born without the ability to feel pain. Do you think everyone knows Gabi Gingrich's name off the top of their head? No, we had to explain. Gabi Gingrich was a girl who can't feel pain. Thalidomide. Not everybody knows what thalidomide is. I explain it every single time. Thalidomide was a drug in the 1960s that blah, 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 blah. But when we then use it carefully to respond to sovereign zone bodily rights arguments, then it's very, very helpful. But even though most people, I mean, a lot of people, some people know what thalidomide is, but not everybody does. Andrew on Facebook, who was ultimately, here's the one that I mentioned before, he was ultimately glad that he posted it because the discussion with pro-life people on his page he felt was worth being unfriended by a few pro-choice people. But he added, he said, my question for pro-lifers is, do you think it's appropriate for the media to talk about the need for gun control after this tragedy? Because if you don't, it seems like a double standard.
I thought that too. As soon as the shooting happened, my first thought was, oh, great, now everyone's going to start talking about how we need more gun control, which could spark some positive discussion, but it can also just spark a bunch of annoying memes about gun control. And that's annoying.
That'll always happen, though.
And we don't want to be gun control. We don't want to be oh my gosh, someone got shot, now they're all going to talk about gun control.
Yeah.
We don't want to be that because that gets annoying. People use that, and I think they are exploiting a tragedy for their pet agenda.
Well, but to be fair, I do, like, when I put myself in the gun control people's shoes, I think that this issue is more closely related to gun control.
There's a closer link than abortion.
Much closer.
Much closer. A gun was used.
Might have had an impact on how he got guns. I don't know how he got his guns, but whatever. Right. I mean, he came with a bunch of them. So,
but again, that's...
whatever. So we debate whether everyone should have huge assault rifles and not just pistols. And we have all these debates, and these are valuable discussions to have that I don't really know exactly what I think because they're complicated, and I need to think more about it. So
maybe it comes down to timing then. With something like that, if it is closely related, then it just comes down to timing. Like, you don't start talking about it right afterwards.
Maybe even I think typically the way the media. I mean, maybe even the day after you'd be talking about that. After you do kind of the initial stuff, maybe maybe the next day or a few days later, you're starting to kind of take this to the next level. What should we do with this?
And if something's more closely related, like someone's killed in front of an abortion clinic, then of course that's going to lead to talking about the abortion debate, and you're very careful with that, and you're careful when you start, but there's a big leap between...
But you're also going to be talking about, like, why should we not kill people that are going to abortion clinics and things like that. I mean, there's more, like,
or why you shouldn't
just be going to abortion. You should be responding to what actually happened in that case, which is someone wrongly murdered somebody, even if that person was quote-unquote pro-life.
Right, and all I'm talking about is that there's some things that are closer related where it's naturally going to lead to a topic. I think we're forcing it. Nobody is thinking about abortion when people are killed in Colorado. You're forcing it in their face.
Right.
It's even worse than the gun control.
I think the whole thing with the media, though, is that we have to understand the media has to move through things quickly in order to maintain interest. So the standard that applies to the media and how soon they talk about stuff is going to be different. Yeah.
Very valuable point. I'm really glad you said that because it's true, and I wouldn't have said that. That's very, very good. Yeah, I mean, I've read interviews from people that, like producers and that are working in like CNN and stuff like that now, and they're just commenting like the way that news channels have to work now is way different than it was 30 years ago, and part of that is it's a very, very quick news cycle, and that's part of it. Okay, Jessica, who is pro-choice, responded to this by saying, "I will wholeheartedly admit abortion kills." But to that person whom was carrying that fetus, they felt terminating that pregnancy was needed or else they wouldn't have done it. It is not a choice taken lightly. Generally speaking, I agree with that. I feel like comparing a random killing spree by a madman to the termination of life within one's womb is a stretch and probably offensive to those involved. Oh, your son was shot in the head? That's totally like this aborted fetus over here, was kind of the way that she put it.
And that's the danger in using this comparison, is people are then going to focus on the differences, which is accurate. There are big differences. A woman who's going in for an abortion is not thinking about her child in the same way as a madman who wants to kill everybody in a movie theater and thinks he's the Joker from
or
Batman.
Whatever
it's psychotic.
It's different.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. And that's what people are going to start focusing on.
If you think aborting women are psychotic, then you clearly have never been talked to a woman about having an abortion or been a sidewalk counselor.
You should shut up about the pro-life issue and stay at home. I'm serious about that. I don't want to hear people who are ignorant on this topic.
I agree.
Blabbing their mouths.
Go to our YouTube channel and look up. It's one of our oldest videos, but still maybe my favorite one is the rant on what was it? Mean pro-lifers stay off of YouTube. If you look that up, there's a rant back when we were in an ugly library. That was still one of the best. I think it was me, so I know it sounds like I'm patting myself, but that was a very important thing to say, and I'll probably link to it. Okay, Greg, who is personally pro-life but thinks abortion should remain legal, said on another page, somebody compared the right to having an abortion to the right to removing or treating cancer. So a pro-choice person said, oh, like abortion is like cancer. He said, I cannot imagine a pro-choice person looking at this picture, the Colorado thing, thinking, oh no, I never realized women who abort or the doctors who perform abortion could be equated to mass murders. I'm switching sides. Thanks for the heads up. The same way...
I like this guy.
In the same way, I can't see pro-life people reading the cancer comparison saying, oh, I see now. I don't want to live with cancer. People should be able to have all of the abortions they want. Thanks for explaining it in that way.
And that's the problem with these memes, is all you're doing is making your own side start to ridicule and look at simple arguments. And it's never going to convince the other side because they immediately see the hole in the argument.
Unless you're using it as a tool to start conversations.
And being extra careful.
Yeah,
extra careful.
I won't say more careful, but careful.
That's why I'm still against using these comparisons as memes or posters on Facebook.
I agree.
I think they're best used in one-on-one conversations, whether that's one-on-one text in email or Facebook, or one-on-one conversations face-to-face, because then you can use it appropriately and it won't get taken out of context.
So I've seen stuff like this since I was 13 years old. There's a thing, now I've got it in 2 slides, but I've seen, originally there were cards that had it on like one thing. They would have all the dead from the American wars and then compare it to abortion. And so I said, that's been done for a decade. So what if someone did a meme like this and put it on Facebook? It just said to put the statistics and compare to, something that is, helpful to understand how many babies have died, then here's a comparison, and they made this into a picture. Would you be opposed to that?
I think I'd be kind of neutral on it. I think it's better, but I don't think that I'm not convinced that using memes on Facebook is going to be very effective. That is a great tool if you're giving a pro-life speech, if you're talking one-on-one with a friend, if you're talking just to pro-life people, so if you're just putting out there for pro-life people. But the problem with Facebook, once you give it to a pro-life person, they repost it, it's going to go to their pro-choice friends, they're going to see it, and they're going to... Because that is not addressing the humanity of the unborn. So if you haven't already talked about the unborn being a human person, then in a sense that's begging the question, and people are going to ignore it.
Which gets to Gabi's friend. Let's just go right there because we need to talk about question begging.
So I have a friend of mine who feels that whenever people bring up things like this and comparisons, he feels that it's begging the question, that it's like a picture like that or talking about the Holocaust is automatically assuming that the person you're talking to thinks the unborn is human.
This specifically says, kill 12 people here and it's a massacre, kill 12 people here and it is a choice. This does presuppose what we believe, which is that the unborn are people, which is one more reason why this is not going to help pro-choice people, because all the pro-choice person says, I don't buy the premise. I don't think it's a person. So,
so start with the correct premise in a conversation, and you can then use comparisons. Using it out of order, your argument doesn't work. Arguments have to be done in order.
Well, I think sometimes, though, with a picture, like the exhibit that we'll take to college campuses, one of the exhibits compares it to genocide, and we use that as a conversation tool. So sometimes putting a picture out gets the interest,
But then we're carefully communicating.
Discussing it. Exactly.
Right.
I mean, and that's a little bit harder to do on Facebook.
And it's never
way harder to do on Facebook.
It's never used alone either.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we might have a photo that refers to genocide, but there's also going to be photos just talking about, is the unborn human?
Right.
And you're not taking
Well, some
it out
people
of
do the
context.
Genocide Awareness Project, though, and that's all that does is compare abortion to genocide. But what I prefer is the way that we talk about it at Justice for All, which is just saying, you know, when I talk to a pro-choice person and they see that part of the exhibit, the original JFA 18-foot-tall exhibit, I say, this side is the most confusing and misunderstood side by people that walk by. And I kind of understand why. They think, a lot of people, that we're comparing women who have abortions to people like Hitler and genocidal maniacs. But we're not. All we're trying to say here is that is it possible that our society is like other societies that allow these things to happen. So we're carefully communicating what exactly I think.
And you're just going to avoid a lot of problems if you start with the first premise that the unborn is a human being.
Okay, just two more. Angela, I'm not exactly sure where Angela is on the abortion debate, but she's reacting to the caption under Bryan's picture. So let me reread. This is under the two pictures. Bryan kind of has his thing, and what it says is, some may say it is wrong to compare these two issues. That is exactly what Planned Parenthood wants the world to believe. They deny that abortion is an act of violence and commit the same crime that outraged the world, the senseless murder of innocent human persons. So Angela said, and this is her reacting to that specific, that wording. She said, some may say it is wrong to compare these two issues. So what? We don't care about people's feelings. Go pro-life. That's all I read, she said. That's all I read. And she said, not to mention the fact that this picture maker is taking advantage of such a recent tragedy. Let these people's families finish their burial service before you bastardize their memories for your agenda, please.
And that's what we were talking about, is making sure that people finish their grieving process and there's no longer an emotional connection, because otherwise they're going to respond emotionally. We're making a logical comparison. We want people to respond logically, not emotionally. Though I will say that at least he had that caption on the bottom. I think it slightly may have helped him a little bit avoid, because some people would have maybe given him a little bit of the benefit of a doubt. But again, you're creating an issue that didn't need to be created.
I don't know. I felt kind of the opposite way, that it might have been better with a different caption on the bottom. I think a caption on the bottom
certainly,
is helpful.
yeah. I think the caption could have been better worded, but would you agree that a caption is better than no caption?
Yes, I do. But I mean, what he said about Planned Parenthood, I felt like this is what Planned Parenthood wants you to believe, and I'm like that. I just don't like him saying that. I don't know if it's just an emotional reaction or if it's the fact that Planned Parenthood hasn't come out with a statement about the Aurora shooting. So
probably not that helpful.
He's saying Planned Parenthood wants the world to believe that the unborn aren't persons. That's what he's saying.
And that's true.
Because that's what they believe.
Right.
And so it's not like this. To me, it's almost this like, oh, Planned Parenthood doesn't want you to believe that. Kind of like the government doesn't want you to think that FEMA camps exist somewhere in the middle of the U.S. So I don't know. Maybe that's a fault.
I don't know.
Reaction.
I think you might be a little bit too harsh here, because I think,
maybe I am. I tend to be.
I feel like I think this is a true statement that Planned Parenthood wants the entire nation, if they could get there, to believe that the unborn's not a person. Because you're right, they don't think the unborn's a person, so they don't want us to think something stupid that the unborn is a person that would, and then we're trying to make it illegal. I mean,
and if we did, they'd be out of business, and they do want to stay in business.
We saw it in
that
that leaked document we talked about just an episode or two ago. They basically said, we don't care about people being pro-life. We just don't want them trying to make abortion illegal. That's what they care about. So obviously they want the world to believe the unborn aren't persons, and because then people aren't going to try to make it illegal. So I think that's fair. It's just maybe the way it's worded feels antagonistic or conspiracy theory-like.
It does
whatever.
Feel conspiracy theory-like.
And the font and the black background and I don't know.
Okay, Linda Hughes pro-life. And by the way, if you think that I'm just picking and choosing you should have read the pro-choice people that like this thing, couldn't find any. Okay, I couldn't find any.
Send them.
I mean, I'm reading the nicest things pro-choice people had to say. I'm not reading I disagree with people that said every single time you make any comparison, it's wrong because the events are wrong inherently for their own reasons. No, I disagree with that. I think so.
Right.
There were some that were even more extreme about their views about it, and I haven't read all of those because we don't have time to read every single thing. But I'm giving you the best I've got, and I don't have pro-choice people actually reacting well to this. The last comment, Lindy, who's pro-life, said that I don't like the word murder used. He said abortion is a senseless murder of innocent human persons. He said, I don't like the word used in murder because, one, it turns people off extremely fast, and two, technically murder is illegal taking of a life, which abortion isn't.
It also implies intent.
Oh, you don't agree?
I don't know. Is murder just the legal definition?
The legal definition of murder. Okay, now here, I've said this before, but it's worth repeating.
We've had this debate before.
The legal definition of murder in America is an unlawful killing of one human being to another human being. So, technically, from the legal definition, abortion isn't murder because abortion is legal.
There's also intent involved.
But it's killing, it's homicide.
But murder as a philosophical term is different than murder as a legal term. Because just because something's illegal,
but not everyone gets that distinction.
Okay. Right.
So I say killing or whatever, so that I don't have to have this debate with people about terms. I don't want to have a semantics thing for 5 minutes and the person walks away. So, but most people, when they see murder, they see it the way Lindy did. Right. Maybe it's not what Bryan meant. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But
people think of murder because they're watching CSI.
Right.
And they know that, illegal killing, well, that could be manslaughter. You hit someone with your car. That's illegal, but murder implies that there's an intent, and people automatically think of malice, forethought. And that's not what happens with a mother to her child. And I mean, perhaps there's one or two, but I would, as a rule, say that no, that's not.
Maybe like in the case of a forced abortion or something like that, or like Scott Peterson intentionally killing Lacey. And
that would be. I think everyone agrees that.
And he was convicted for murder.
And it's murder because it's illegal to not be an abortionist and kill an unborn baby.
So avoid the hassle of debating things you don't have to. Yeah. We could say that's the theme of this show.
It's not a moral argument, it's a pragmatic argument.
Yeah.
Do you really want, even if you think this is awesome, do you really want to deal with the fact that that all the pro-choice people you're trying to have an impact on are now pissed off at you because
Make it easy for yourself.
I agree with Bryan in the sense that we should be thinking outside the box. And being proactive and finding ways to get people dialoguing about this. And I commend him for being creative and trying to find a way to get people talking about it. And to his credit, again, he did do that for some people. And for those people, I think maybe this whole thing was actually helpful. And like in the end, the net was a net gain for those people because they got to talk to Bryan Kemper, who I know to be a reasonable, articulate, pro-life apologist who is able to make reasonable arguments to just about, I'm sure, anything that the pro-choice people he was talking to had to say. And I bet those people, anyone reading those, was helped by it. I'm concerned about the people they didn't get to talk to. So in the end, that's my view. I love Bryan, but I'm concerned about the way that this comes across to most pro-choice people that see it. If you want to just show it to pro-life people, I think that's more debatable. But that's so. I guess my conclusion is be careful. Just super careful. Like if you're going to post it, fine, post it, but do it. Like think carefully about it first
and be prepared.
Don't do it just because you saw something that looked good, like. From a graphic design perspective, looks better than most pro-life memes, and share it because it is pro-life. Think and then share. And there are some pro-life images that I do share, and there are some that I don't. And we're going to be doing an episode of bad pro-life memes and why they're bad, so we can get some general principles out there because there's a lot of them right now. It was a listener mail question I got sent, and then there were so many of them. It's like this would be a whole Life Report episode. So that's coming soon. Thanks for listening.